me to inform you several rules for this event. 1. Please all participants to register via the Google Form link available in the chat box column in the Zoom platform. 2. All panelists and participants must log in using username, format of the institution's name, underscore full name. 3. All panelists should turn on the video and keep the sound mode muted. 4. All participants' video will be turned off and the sound will be muted during the event. 5. Should the participants have questions, please raise the questions via the Ask a Question button. 6. Please do not close your session or log out during the event. You can log out after the event finishes. Ladies and gentlemen, please let me introduce myself. My name is Astri Megatari, and I will be the master of ceremony for the second session. We are opening today's second session with the big theme, navigating payment system to unlock the potential of digital economy in the era of continuous disruption. Hard Talk 3, marching on together, interlinking bank and fintech through open API for faster digitization in financial services. And this session will be moderated by the Director of Payments Transformation PwC India, Mr. Zubin Tafti. Please welcome Mr. Zubin Tafti.
Hey, hi everybody, and a very good morning and a very good afternoon to everyone around the world. So my name is Zubin Tafti, and I'm a director with the Payments Transformation Practice based in PwC in India. So basically, we're a team that dedicatedly focuses on consulting in the payments trade, right from operations, technology, strategy, regulations, governance, everything to do with payments. And as part of my role as part of PwC, I predominantly drive business development for all our payment consulting services across our network firms across the globe. And more specifically within domestically in India, I do a lot of work with fintechs and non-banking entities to be able to participate in the payment space. So thank you everyone for that. And we have a very, very interesting panel with us today. So we have Ibu Yanti Setiawan, who's the director and group head of Financial System Surveillance Department, Bank Indonesia. We also have Pak Anurag Herlianto, who's the department head of Banking Research and Regulations, OJK. Then we have Pak Timothy Utama, who's the managing director of Treasury and Trade Solutions at Citibank, and he also heads up the Committee on Open Banking as part of Indonesia Payment System Association. And also we have Pak Budi Gandasoebrata, who's also the managing director of GoPay and the vice chairman of AFTECH, who's the Fintech Association in Indonesia. So without further ado, I would kind of thank the panel and thank Fintech Association for asking me to moderate this very interesting session on open banking and how APIs can make open banking real within a country. And I'm very humbled to be part of an excellent audience, and I believe we have the perfect audience because we have the central bank, we have OJK who manages banking, we have the Payment System Association and the Fintech Association together, and I think these combination of these four parties kind of put together an excellent combination to make open banking successful in any country for that matter. So without further ado, maybe I'll jump into first, to question to Ibu Yanti, which is more in terms of that what are the key objectives and milestones to be achieved, the realization of implementation of the Indonesia payment system blueprint. I had a read of the blueprint a couple of days more, and I found it a very interesting document. I was very impressed that it was a very good document, well thought through, well structured in terms of drawing out the plan. And more particularly, would want you to understand, on open API standards, how do you see this spanning out in the country?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Zubin, for this very honorable occasion. And thank you for having read our consultative paper. I actually want to go through your questions as, concerning the key objective of the implementation of the BSPI 2025, in particular in open API standard implementation. Basically, the BSPI 2025 contains three essential policies. It is the restructuring of the payment system in the digital era, and then the interoperable and interconnected payment system infrastructure, and the third is the payment data is a public good. So the key objectives here are the payment system itself, the interoperability and interconnectivity, and the data. When we talk about the digital transformation, sorry, there is no way if we don't talk about the data opening through the open API. However, in accordance to our objectives as central bank to achieve and to maintain an efficient, safe, and reliable payment system, open API standard implementation is aimed to support innovation and competition and the integrity of the open API ecosystem itself. So by using the standard, the objective is that we all encourage the interlink between bank and the fintechs in a more efficient and directed manner. I think that's from me. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Ibu Yanti. I think a follow-on question is, just wanted to understand what has been, what are the key successes that have been achieved so far on this journey, right? Especially on the open banking initiative, and especially more specifically on the open API standards. Could you help us understand in terms of where we are at on this roadmap and what do we see ahead?
Okay. So basically, we were just starting the national working group on the open API standard this mid-June this year. Sorry, after we have received responses from the industry regarding our open API consultative paper. So the national working group itself consists of around 16 prominent payment system providers, the banks, fintechs, e-commerce. So I think at this stage, it is too early to claim any success. However, if we talk about the timeline, I would say that the National Working Group, together with the Working Group 1 in Bank Indonesia, has doing their job on the track. And if there is no obstacle, we predict that on December 11, the technical guidance will be finished. And after that, we will be on the way to the pace of development, piloting, and first implementation. Of course, at this stage, we really have to maintain the timeline because it is a pandemic situation, so many things that have to be done virtually. So the discussion among the member of the National Working Group is really very intensified during this month. But I hope that the project will be finished on time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ibu Yanti. So maybe I'll jump on to Pak Anung, who's the department head of banking and research regulations at OJK. So, given your current role at OJK, I mean, how do you see this? What is the encouragement and how do you see the implementation of OPI standards and what has been carried out so far from your side?
Okay, thank you, Pak Zubin and other distinguished panelists. Thank you very much. So I think the terms of the open banking is not new, since the banks in Indonesia have been implementing it for some time. For example, banks transfer the data to another parties in a secure manner. So otherwise, API is such a new tool to help banks, apps communicate with each other. So before banks share their data, API has been used internally to support their business process, as we all know this. So the delivery of the financial services to customers, one vertically integrated, but now it's being unbundled and offered by non-bank third parties, so such as fintech firms. At the same time, these third parties may also create new services that banks can leverage, adding value to delivery chains. These developments are all aspects of open banking. Now, straightforward to your questions on how the OJK encourage the banks. Before that, let me briefly explain or describe how the other regulator and other jurisdiction do their business at oversighting. Yeah. So regulatory scopes and oversight of open banking activities may vary across jurisdictions. So they often include similar fundamental consent and privacy expectations, as well as data security requirements. Basel Committee and banking supervisions 2019 explained that authorities have taken a range of action related to open banking in their respective jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions require banks to share customer permission data and require third party to register with a particular regulatory or supervisory authority. So this is more prescriptive. Yeah. Other jurisdictions have issued guidance and recommended standard and published open API standards and technical specifications. So more facilitative. And remaining jurisdictions follow a market-driven approach and currently have no explicit rule or guidance that either require or prohibit the sharing of customer permission data by banks and third parties. Now let me give you what happened in our banking industry, yeah, in Indonesia. So as may have been seen in practice for sometimes in our banking industry, fintech and banks have been collaborating using open API. So this is known as the market-driven approach, in which both parties came to an agreement to use open API bilaterally without any regulatory interventions. This is basically the approach that we applied in our regulatory regimes. So basically, we gave the ample rooms for the banking industry, financial system to innovate, but at the same time, we also remind them to mitigate and know well about the unknown risks that might emerge. Back to you, Zubin.
Sure, thank you, Pak Anung. And I think that's an approach that we've seen successfully work in many countries. And when we see there's already market-driven, and market-driven approaches used, we see adoption also picking up very quickly. So I think that's an excellent way, and I'm happy to hear that Indonesia has already started collaborating, and I see that. And India also, as you see, has no per se regulations, but still open banking is very prevalent. Whether you take UPI or account aggregator in India, open banking has been a reality for over 10 years before I think open banking as such as a trend came in, and most countries started doing that. So I'm glad to hear that's the thing in Indonesia, and I'm happy to see that regulators are taking the view and are being more supportive and seeing how best risks can be mitigated, of course, because that is important, because there needs to be trust, and that is an important aspect, and I see that's very interesting. Also, I just wanted to hear your perspective on importance of increasing the collaboration between the relevant stakeholders. So where do you see, how can OJK, and what is it that we believe in the market should happen so that things can move faster, better, and things can become more of a reality sooner?
So with regard to support that and your concerns, that OJK basically has issued several regulations that allowing banks to utilize connectivity between the bank's electronic systems with an electronic system owned by a partner of the bank through the open application programming interfaces or open API. So for example, OJK regulations number 12 concerning digital banking services by commercial banks. That's also give the ample room for the banks to basically do their business, innovate, but at the same time, they also have to be aware of the risk, including the very weakness network and their business. For example, the customer. Okay, and the other part, one of the main challenges basically facing the open banking is security. We are very concerned on that as well. Yeah. With the absence of the computer emergency response team, for example, and national IT incident response protocol, for example, yes, there is the unknown risk that going around. So to overcome these threats, bank must therefore implement strong customer authentication standard. In addition to that, banks should adopt technology that detects customer behavior and should enhance their IT security to prevent fraud. Yeah. So two key messages to this open APIs, basically security and customer data protections.
Yes, I think these two are very important cornerstones when drafting out open regulations, and it again plays on the angle of trust. And that's very important because trust is earned over a long time and can be broken very quickly, and it's something that needs to be there for open banking to be successful, both from both parties, banks with fintechs with banks, and at the end of the day, the end consumers and customers, whether it's corporates or your retail end consumers, being using these services either through a fintech or through a bank directly, and that's predominantly a very, very important aspects. And maybe a common question I can ask to both Ibu Yanti and Pak Anung about, each of you have different roles that you all play, and if you were to specifically say that what is the support that you require from, say, banks or fintechs or any other specific stakeholders within the ecosystem to make open banking implementation optimal, then what would be your request to any of the other stakeholders? So maybe I can start with Ibu Yanti, your side from a central regulator. What do you believe is something that you would expect from either banks or fintechs or any other specific bodies within the country, or kinds of end consumers who you would expect at the same time? Maybe after that I'll jump on to Pak Anura for that.
Thank you, Zubin. Talking about support and assistance, undoubtedly this BSBI 2025 is a huge project, so that the synergy among authorities, BA, OJK, other respective institutions like the Ministry of the Information System and Technology, and especially for the banks and fintechs itself, are very, very essential to ensure the optimum implementation of the open API standard. Indeed, the big support from industry is to adopt the open API standard that have been launched, that will be launched by Bank Indonesia and together with the payment system associations, while the banks and fintechs doing the digital transformations. Compliance to the standard implies to us that banks and fintechs would collaborate in accordance with the principles that elaborated in the standard. Honor the governance and at the same time concern to the consumer protection. But of course, we also need the support from the environment itself, the financial system itself, as well as the support from the legal basis. For example, the act about the data protection and something like that. I think that's the support that really needed for the BSBI 2025 to be successful. Thank you.
Yeah, Pak Zubin, couldn't agree more with the Ibu Yanti. I think among regulators we have to collaborate, as well as to the industry as well. And what we expect from the industry is basically know your risk, know your business, know your infrastructure, and please do the continuous educations to the weakest network, the weakest part in your network, means a customer. That's all, Zubin. Back to you.
Okay, just a follow-on question. Like a lot of countries, debate with whether this should be something that's made mandated, or that's something that is opt-in, opt-out, optional for banks to comply with. Just wanted to hear your thoughts on what is the thought process in Indonesia, that once you have these regulations out, would you have a window by which you would expect everyone to comply with, or any thoughts on that?
From the regulatory perspective for GK, yes, Pak Zubin, basically our regime is a principle-based. So
okay.
as I said before, that we give the ample room from the industry to innovate. But from the regulatory perspective, any innovations is always invite what kind of diabolical dilemma. You know what I mean? So this is very difficult, because characteristic of the regulator is primary missions to detect and address risk to the financial systems. But now we are facing the massive changing ecosystem out there. Digitalizations, the acceleration of digitalization especially happened during the pandemic. So everybody at home. So the changing expectations from the stakeholder, especially for the customer, to have the very quick, efficient, and secure the transaction from his rooms, not necessarily going to the physically to the bank. So if there is a two difficult choice, whether we choose benefit but allowing new risks to proliferate, or blocking benefit but resulting in the low competitiveness of the banks. But now we consider that the industry is basically mature currently. So we presume that industry currently have a good governance, aware of risk, and they are not going to suicide with the innovations. So based on that, our regulations stand to the principle base, give the bank the ample rooms to innovate and benefit from their innovations. That's hopefully this can encourage the industry to continue benefiting the economy of Indonesia. So with regard to the open API, Ibu Yanti, our stand is basically we need a standard API, but not necessarily to standardize the open API.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think now I'll move on to the other panelists, Pak Timothy and Pak Budi. So in your respective roles as part of head of the committee at the Payment System Association, or as the vice chairman of the Indonesia Fintech Association, how are you all encouraging and launching the implementation of these open API standards, and what has been carried out so far from your perspective with your participants and your members that form your associations? Maybe I can start with Mr. Timothy and then maybe move on to Pak Budi.
Hey Zubin, selamat siang Bu Yanti, Pak Anung, and fellow and Pak Budi. Again, thank you for having me in this panel. I think it's an exciting opportunity to be part of this. We have heard the introductions and the background and the purpose that Ibu Yanti and Pak Anung actually shared. So the role that we play, and I represent ASPI, and in my day-to-day life, actually, I run the transactional business of Citi in Indonesia. So we are very much interested in this development at the same time. But if I just switch now and put my hat, wearing the ASPI hat, I think first and foremost from the industry. So ASPI is an association of the National Association of the Payments Systems of Indonesia, whose members are all the players in the industry. So we represent not just banks, we represent across the board that are involved in payments. So first and foremost, I would say that number one, from an industry perspective, the opportunity of the digital transformation is enormous. So we have seen all the reports, we have seen all the findings and how we have transformed. But in particular, from the digital economy perspective, Indonesia is the largest in the ASEAN sector, right? So this is why, number one, is so exciting. We are going to have north of 100 billion in terms of value of this coming to 2025. And I will not be surprised if it's going to be even faster adoption of that. So therefore, from an industry perspective, I think it is very, very important. Then when the business size is north of 100 billion, and today we stand about 40, 50 billion, we got to make sure that the infrastructure that we put in, the ecosystem that we have in Indonesia, like Ibu Yanti mentioned, is one that is going to be credible, one that is going to be safe, one that's going to be efficient, one that is going to be, user-friendly. And Pa Anung, I think, mentioned a number of times that we got to promote innovation. So as a representation of the industry and at this moment, I also head up the working group 1, which is the Open API, leading into open banking. It is our job within ASPI, where we have got 16 participants now, as Ibu Yanti mentioned, from various representation, banks and non-banks all together, including wallet aggregators, e-commerce players, market players. So we are now putting a structure on two things. One is making sure that the standard is going to be acceptable to be able to support what Ibu Yanti said and Pa Anung said. And then number two is the governance that is going to be put in place to make sure that our ecosystem in Indonesia is going to be of an international and, and we can continue to grow. And that will spell out a lot of things that is working in the background. So I think from the ASPI angle, we are very, very excited with this opportunity. And you've seen, and I think we've got a colleague from the GoPay side, Gojek side. You've seen how we have transformed, in the last 2-3 years, how fast we have grown, right? So this open API is going to be very exciting. I think it has been received extremely well within the industry. Thank you, Zubin.
Sure, thanks, Pak Timothy. Over to you, Pak Budi, on this side from your role as a vice chairman in a fintech association. How are you encouraging this and implementation of open APIs amongst your participants and your members?
Sure, thank you, Zubin. Selamat siang, Ibu Yanti, Pak Anung. Selamat siang juga, Pak Timothy. Thank you, everyone. It's so exciting to be here. And just to echo what was said earlier by Ibu Yanti, Pak Anung, as well as Pak Timothy, I think from AFTECH point of view, we see this as a great opportunity to really encourage collaboration between banks and non-banks, between financial services, like the traditional financial services and the new up and coming fintech players. Because I think we also realize that in some cases, there are services or elements of banking that is still pretty much tied up to banks, right? I mean, that's why if you read the consultative paper by Bank Indonesia, one of the main purposes is to really promote interlink between banking and fintech, and also to maintain banks as the main actor for not only payments, but also financial services. If you see in other markets, such as Europe with PSD2, they have established certain standards for payment initiation, account information or aggregation, just to name a few examples. And you see this has galvanized also connection between non-banks and banks. And the reality is it gives a lot of benefits to the user as well. So what we do in AFTECH, especially for members who are not part of the ASPI and really like fintech that is mostly under OJK, we see this as a good opportunity for them to be more connected with banks, to foster innovation, and to offer these services in a much more efficient and effective manner. Because Indonesia as a market, as Pak Timothy rightly mentioned, is that we are a large market. However, we still have issues in terms of like financial literacy as well as financial inclusion. So the idea is through this collaboration, Indonesia, the fact is today we are a market which is pretty much mobile driven. So the population, even though they are not included in the formal economy or the formal financial ecosystem, they are pretty much tech savvy. So how do we capitalize access of technology through mobile phones by offering banking and financial services through platforms, fintech platforms, who are not necessarily in a sense like traditional banking or financial services, but through interlink between banks and fintech, they can also help and be an arm's extension to offer these payments and financial services as well. So we see this initiative that is initiated by the regulators and also supported by ASPI and also by us AFTECH as well as the industry. We see this as a key initiative that can really galvanize financial inclusion, but also financial literacy to the public. And we're very excited to be part of this initiative. We have been very proactive as well in joining all of the working group. One of the working group that Pak Timothy led is the Open API. So a lot of our members, who also members of ASPI, are already active in participating and really giving inputs to how the standard should look like, and also other working groups as well that are initiated by Bank Indonesia on this, especially for the payment system blueprint of 2025. So to conclude, as I said, AFTECH sees this as a really great initiative. It can really foster innovation and collaboration between bankings and fintechs. It can create a new payment and financial services that is more efficient and also more effective. And eventually this will help us to galvanize financial inclusion as well as financial literacy. Thank you. Over to you, Zubin.
Sure. Thanks, Pak Budi. And yes, I see, financial inclusion, and its true sense, sometimes when we say financial inclusion, we limit it to someone having an account, but I think it's truly inclusive, where a person can have a lending product, where a person can have insurance, a person can have, the entire gamut of, financial products and literacy and education on that. I think that's one of the key areas that we believe is also an important element, in open banking. I'm leading to my next question, since you're part of, the FinTech Association. I mean, we've seen this in many countries, and we've also, in India, it's become quite prominent where, non-banks and FinTechs for that matter, becoming a little more, involved or, having more meaningful roles when it comes to decision making. For example, I'll give you an example, like in India, when UPI went out launch, it was initially, driven by banks in terms of volumes. Today, almost 75% of the volumes, which are 2 billion a month, which we hit last month, is predominantly driven by non-banks. So you have the likes of Google Pay or a Phone Pay or a Paytm, which is driving majority of the volumes. And NPCI saw that, and they said, why don't we involve them in, evolving the product and, making decisions on how it can be kind of grow better. And they did that. So they put people from some of these players onto the committees that take care of UPI for that matter. In fact, NPCI today, recently, a couple of months ago, kind of made an open offer for, it was initially only bank owned. Now a small stake of it is owned by a lot of non-banks also. So I think it's done that pretty well, and that's done an excellent job here. So coming back to my question here, that you see this ability and this evolving future, and do you see something like this would be good for Indonesia? Do you see this already happening? Just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
No, of course. I mean, as I said, we in not only in AFTECH, I guess like the industry, non-fintech, not non-fintech, non-banks. I mean, we do aspire to be more proactive and to collaborate more and to participate more in the ecosystem. If you see, like, UPI is a very good example, right? In India, you have UPI, and now you have players like Google Play, Phone Pay, and then you have initiatives such as Bharat QR. But what people often forget is, while those non-banks players are in the forefront of really extending these payment use cases to the public, the services that they use are still bank accounts, right? Especially for that, I wouldn't say like direct debit, but really small to medium-sized ticket-sized payments where you directly debit from a bank account. So in its truest sense, it is a collaboration between non-bank, the likes of Google Pay as well as Phone Pay, as well as with banking. Those are who are connected with UPI through the initiative that NPCI created. So we're seeing Indonesia is also gearing towards that eventually a lot of these banking products will be able to be accessed by the public through platforms that is provided by banks themselves, but also through interlink between banking and fintechs. It may be also offered through services that are traditionally non-bank. Just to give you an example, and this is like a really quote unquote manual example, right? Because I work in Gojek and GoPay, so I just use my company as an example. So our drivers in Gojek who are traditionally people in the informal sector, because of Gojek and GoPay, they are now introduced to banking products such as insurance, as well as, fundings, bank accounts, and other payments and financial products as well. And the collaboration is already there, right? But how can we automate it? And through Open API, a lot of these stuffs, the manual process, the manual underwriting process, the onboarding process can be automated. We've seen more progressive regulation in both BI and OJKs to start introducing alternatives to face-to-face KYC. Now you can do video KYC. Now we have access to Dukcapil, which is kind of like Aadhaar in India, where you have national database that is owned by the government for identity verification. So there's a lot of innovation that is happening in different sectors like banks and then ID cards. So how can we capitalize on this to really provide payments and financial services to the public in a much more seamless manner? And I believe that through the collaboration between banks, financial services, as well as other government entities and regulators, as well as fintech, this is a goal that we can really achieve, hopefully in the not so long term. Hopefully in the near term, we are able to really provide this to the public and really achieve financial inclusion in its truest sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, maybe I'll have a question to both Timothy and Pak Budi. This is on basically, your perspective on the, the ASPI 2025, blueprint that's out there, in particular in regions on the API implementation. Is where do you see, the potential challenges lie to the payment systems? I mean, where do you see the challenges today, and how would that be overcome? Any thoughts around that? Maybe I can start with Pak Budi and then go on to Pak Budi.
Zubin, I think that's absolutely a very relevant question, especially when we just about to start through this process of making a standard, if you like. But like Pak Budi said, and I think all of our friends here that are in this panel, on this panel and participating, API is not a new stuff, right? So when we move forward now, trying to figure it out, and the fact that we are here to look at the standard and to look at the making sure that the ecosystem is what Ibu Yanti said, achieve its goals. I believe finding the right balance is going to be absolutely critical. And I see there are four probably areas as a high level observation. The first one, I think what people talk about is always going to be, it is going to be very prescriptive in terms of regulatory driven, or is it going to be market driven, right? So that's one big question that people always ask me, and they know that I sit here with ASPI and work closely with BI. So that's all the time question asks. And then the same time is whilst I think Anung mentioned very rightly to say that, do we want convenience and we want it so lax to allow everything to come in and work well? Or do we need to ensure that the risks is as well managed? Because always remember, this is about payment systems. When it comes to payment systems, we all know too well, especially in this digital era, things can go pear-shaped very fast unless the standard is correct, unless the requirement is well met, and so on and so forth, the infrastructure. The third area is, because I think you will be seeing, and we have seen this, this is not just the space of banks. Banks traditionally, I think, have got the approach that when it comes to payments, they are reasonably comfortable and conversant. But now we have got new players coming on into this, right? So are we making it level playing field? You know, and I work for a bank, but I sit in the industry. I can see that there's going to be a play between level playing field that you know, allows people to participate in the payment industry or ecosystem. The fourth one that is probably, you know, from a perspective of a player is the customer experience. You know, we got to make sure that what is going to be implemented in the ecosystem is actually adding value to the client or the customers. And I think that we touch a bit more in terms of how do we implement this going forward. That is going to be as painless, but at the same time maintaining the high standard. So that's perhaps some of the thought process that we are pushing through when we work through the working groups, whereby we have two sub-working groups. One is looking at the technical standards, and the other one is looking at the governance standards. So these are the things that we always put in mind and making sure that we can meet the right balance. So thank you, Zubin. Can't hear you, Zubin.
Still mute, I think.
There you go, you're back.
Okay, sorry, I'm back. Yeah, I was not able to unmute myself. Okay, thanks, Timothy, for that. Pak Budi, any additions to what Pak Timothy said in terms of challenges that you see?
Well, of course, I think Pak Timothy already mentioned it, like quite very specific. But I guess the general question is like when the term open API or open banking, it's like how open is open, right? But I think I wouldn't say the directive, but the recommendation is we will start with payment use cases. That's the start. There are also challenges like the collaboration between banking and fintech is already happening today. However, if we speak technically, there's a lot of different standards that are out there. In some cases, talk about like different API standards. Ones are using JSON or XML. So the idea is when you standardize this, there's going to be a huge effort, especially in infrastructural changes that need to be done. So I guess the question is, once the API standard is out, is it how long will it take for all the banks and the fintechs to adapt to these standards? Because we know that the purpose and also the objective is good. We want to push innovation. We want to push collaboration. But given that the changes are on the back end is pretty much infrastructural changes. You change languages, API standards that are interacting between two different systems. And how far and what will be the standard? That will be the challenges that needs to be answered. Not to mention that there are different, you have fintechs that are large in size, you have fintechs that are smaller in size, and similar with banks, you have banks who have millions of customers and probably banks which don't have millions of customers. So the number of effort in order to implement these standards will differ from banks to banks or from fintechs to fintechs, right? So these are the challenges that will come up when we start implementing, hopefully soon. But I believe that given the initiative and also the clarity that we've been given so far, hopefully that these challenges will be resolved quite fast.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So I think there was one question that I asked, and maybe I want to redirect that particular question to Ibu Yanti on, mandate for, open banking standards that are coming out. Could you elaborate more on what does, Bank Indonesia believe on this front? Sorry, was I audible?
Actually, I cannot unmute myself here.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I know
Okay.
sometimes it got stuck for
Sorry.
me too. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your following follow-up question. Basically, we have to keep in mind that BSPI 2025 is not only the open API standard. It consists of several initiatives that link each other, and we have to make sure that every single initiatives in BSPI 2025 is going to the Bank Indonesia vision on the payment system that will be restructured and reshaping to answer the digitization era. So the open API standard itself is expected to bring significant benefit to the industry, like Pak Timothy and Pak Budi has already mentioned, and I already mentioned above. First, about the promoting the interoperability and the compatibility. So by using the standard, we expect that every single players can penetrate into the market without having difficulties to create any API development by costly. So we have provide the standard dot, so we have we can reduce the cost of the API development itself. So to achieve that goals, we think that the standard has to be detailed enough in terms of data format, in terms of the communication protocol, the security, and etc., to provide what we call the same environment for its machine or its systems involved in the market to communicate each other. And furthermore, we think that the standard that BI and the ASPI launch has to be prescriptive, because it would then be connected to the BI payment system infrastructure. Maybe I don't have capacity to talk about the other initiative in this occasion, but I can make sure that the open API has to be connected with the infrastructure in BI and align with other BSPI initiative like about data and about other regulation that will be launched on December this year. So the specification has to be set about the technical and about the governance standard to make the open API, which is used by the players, is met the specification that BI has already set in advance. So on the other hand, we realize that we have to give sufficient rooms for the industry, like Pak Anung mentioned about the innovation and the competition. That is why in our open API standard is implemented for the basic services in payment system area. For example, we talk about the credit transfer, we talk about the push payment, balance services, transaction history, and so on, which then the industry could also use for any other use cases or to develop any potential business models by using this standard. So I think I agree with the Pak Timothy mentioned about finding the right balance, and we are trying our best effort together with the ASPI to creating the technical guidelines that provide those two aspects. So back to the whether the standard itself has to be mandated to all the players. I think we are now racing against time because the digitization is now growing so fast. So we have to speed up this implementation to accomplish the new structure of payment system industry to support the digitization of economic and the financial system. So right now we think or we observe that digital is just a project or just a business for a bank, for some banks, I think. Next, in the payment system or BSPI 2025, we want that digital is a core value for every single players, not just business, not just a project, a short-term project, but we want that digital to be a core value for everything. So that we can enter into digital area with the same level playing field. I think that's all. Zubin, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Yanti. And maybe just a last question that I can direct towards Park Timothy, and very related to what Ibu Yanti mentioned about this balancing the act in these specifications. And at sometimes we typically when countries are considering this, they say that how specific should they be, or how, broad they should be from a principle base. Also, should we only do payments first, or then do payments and data, or should we first do only data and stabilize and then move on to payments? And these are some of the debates that they have. So just wanted to hear your views on how we are ensuring there is a quick adoption, there is enough room for innovation, and in terms of what is the ideal roadmap you believe is right for Indonesia from an open API standard play perspective.
Yeah, look, again, I think, I believe, the approach that we have adopted is evolving at the same time. So we learn as we move forward, I must say, because it's such a vast area. So when it comes to specifically on the open API, from our perspective, we are very clear what we want to achieve. So first and foremost, if you like, the first cap of the rank would be around payments. And there are specific cases or features that has been socialized and worked through with the members. Therefore, I think the format of this working group is such that we split into the two. One is looking at the technical standards, and this is not just BI driving it, but it's working with a number of participants from the industry. So there's not just banks, but all other players, including market players and payment aggregator, wallets, and the likes, all the fintechs as well. So when it comes to, is it going to be payments alone or data alone? I think at the end of the day, there's nothing that we can do on payments alone with a data. So there's a data element there. There's a payment element there. So we do look at from that angle, but the focus now is to get the payment going, like Ibu Yanti said. So once that is there for the basic payments to happen, then we're gonna then evolve again in the future to make it wider. This is open API for payments, but going forward, the blueprint is about open banking. Open banking opportunities and possibilities are just enormous. Then when it comes to data, the same thing, right? Data is going to be part of this, very much part of this working group. And therefore, what we look into is going to be data protection and customer protection. And how do you make sure that they're all governed properly, be it in a contract or in terms of guidelines? So hopefully that gives a bit of a flavor, but I must say we are far from knowing exactly what's the best approach, but I can tell you there's no lack of collaboration and working very closely. And what I'm very pleased about being in ASPI, I can say that the collaboration with the regulators and the players is very strong, and we want to create what's best for Indonesia at this stage and put Indonesia on the map so that the commercial part of it that I mentioned earlier can be materialized even in a much bigger way with these standards.
Thank you, Pak Timothy, for those inputs. So I think we're almost out of time. So I think we'll take closing comments from all the participants, and maybe you could think of your best thoughts on terms of increasing collaboration. I believe there's already lots happening, but I think that's the key part of collaboration between every entity, and how each of y'all in your respective roles in your organizations see how this becoming a reality. And maybe we can take the order of starting with Ibu Yanti from the regulator, from the central bank, Pak Anung from OJK, then Pak Timothy as part of ASPI, and then Pak Budi as AFTECH, in that order.
Okay, thank you, Zubin.
Yeah,
I think we have already put our steps into the BSPI framework. So we need every support, every assistance that may come from industry players to make the vision come true when it times into 2025. And along the way, we very expected the close collaboration and coordination with every single entities in Indonesia, respective entities in Indonesia, to make our work together is smooth and can achieve our goal together. Thank you.
Pak Anung?
Yeah, I think as a prudential regulator, we respect the mandate of Bank Indonesia and appreciate any step that Bank Indonesia has taken to make the payment systems sound. And I have to the message to the banking industry, not really message, basically, please do the sound collaborations with any other finance sector. Keep innovating and know your innovations, know your business, know your risk, and please mitigate carefully on the unknown risk that might happen due to the massive innovation and digitalizations of the banking industry and the financial sector especially. That's all, Zubin.
Thank you, Pak Anung. Pak Timothy, over to you.
Yeah, look, I think wearing my ASPI hat, I suppose we sit representing the industry, but again, at the same time, working very closely with the regulators. So I would say that from there are three things that we drive, right? So number one, we got to action and to make sure this is actually happened as what Ibu Yanti mentioned, supporting and making sure that BPSI 2025 from the payments perspective is going to be fulfilled. Two is, I think, awareness. We talk about this in terms of we represent the industry. The industry got to be educated a lot more and to be made aware of what's happening. And then the third one is advocacy, right? So we are representing the voice of the industry. So I want to make sure that we are well represented. And I just want to underline, we are not just banks. I work for a bank, but there are a lot more in this ecosystem that is actually contributed by non-banks. So equally, so we got to advocate all that. And then I think my personal hat being in the banking side, I would say, you know, at the end of the day, we got to make all this that is going to be absolutely making sense, that is going to create values for the marketplace, for the clients, for the users, for the players, because there's enough and it's such a big area. So if we do that all, I believe ASPI would absolutely, in my view, hopefully can add that value and be part of this exciting journey of Indonesia leading to 2025.
Thanks, Pak Timothy. And lastly, over to you, Pak Budi.
Sure. I mean, probably as a closing statement, I'd like to start with a gratitude towards Bank Indonesia, OJK, as well as ASPI for this initiative. The hard work that we've done so far together with the industry for both banks and non-banks, fintechs alike. What Pak Timothy said earlier, it's essentially the same, right? What we have right now is essentially an ecosystem, similar to like a coral reef, where you have fishes, you have sunlight, you have planktons. We all play our roles in order to make this ecosystem healthier. And we can only do it through collaboration and innovation between all parties. I always believe that between the regulators, banks, financial services, fintechs, tech startups, we all have a role to play. And ultimately, it is the market that will reap the benefit. And we all have a responsibility to really support this and really give benefits to the market, to the people who really needs it. And of course, to really push the vision of financial inclusion as well as financial literacy for everyone. This is just a start. The journey is still long, but I am confident that we will get there. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think this was a very engaging discussion and a lot of interesting points came out. I know we're short of time, so I think that's all we have, everybody. And I'd like to hand it back over to the Master of Ceremonies to take it over. Thank you, everyone, again, for all your contributions.
Thank you, Zubin. Thank you,
Thanks, Zubin.
everybody.
Terima kasih, Pak Timothy, Pak Budi, Bu Yanti.
Ibu Yanti, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Timothy, Pak Anung, Pak Budi.
Okay.
Zubin.